Hello, everyone, and I am so thrilled to welcome you to our Next Gen Government Training Summit. My name is Emily Jarvis, and I'm the director of Next Gen and the events manager at GovLoop. So thanks so much for joining us. And shockingly, this is the 16th year we've hosted NextGen, and we have really taken a lot of time this year to try and match kind of the sentiment with everything that's going on in government right now to this session today. So we have created a full day of content really geared towards helping you master your professional development, whether that's as a subject matter expert, a first-time supervisor, if you're aspiring to be a supervisor, or you're just wanting to brush up on your skills. Welcome. You are definitely in the right place. And if you want, say hi in the chat. Let us know where you are dialing in from. I am in Rockville, Maryland, where it is currently pouring rain. So if you are experiencing the same weather as me, definitely let me know. But in order to make sure you are all having the best experience possible, I want to spend just a second here explaining our environment. And if you've been to NextGens in the past, things might look and feel a little bit different this year. So we want to take a second to walk you through it. So first things first, if you haven't already, make sure you're visiting that exhibit hall to see all of our wonderful sponsor booths. They make NextGen possible, so you definitely don't want to miss out on those. We also have some additional resources available for you to download in the resources tab at the bottom of this screen. There you'll find slide decks and all kind of relevant CPE information, and we'll get to that here in just a second. And then in the resources environment, in the main space in NextGen, that's where you'll find the slide decks for every session that has slides here at NextGen this year, as well as all of the CPE information. So if you miss it in the individual webinars, you can head out into that main environment, and that's where you'll find all of that information. If you need the closed captioning feature, just look for that show icons button at the bottom of your screen, and that's where you will find that added accessibility. Now, we hope you don't have technical difficulties, but if you do, excuse me, you can send us a message to that Q&A tab along the bottom of your screen. And my colleague Maddie will get all of your questions answered. And here is the secret sauce, friends, because it's in that same portal where you can ask our experts questions. So don't you dare be shy. Put your questions in early and often. And we're going to be taking your questions throughout NextGen today. So make sure you are putting those in. And most of you have already navigated over to that chat and you're putting in where you are dialing in from. I'm seeing everything from Florida to DC, Rhode Island, and everything and anything in between. So love to see it. But you can, of course, chat with your fellow attendees in that chat. And of course, if you miss anything, don't worry. We'll email you a link to the entire event tomorrow. It's going to be sent directly to your inboxes, so you'll be able to watch all the sessions on demand, as well as get all of those additional resources. So we are thrilled to get this kicked off. And a lot of you are here to earn continuing professional education credits, or CPEs. We are going to be offering a CPE for each session that you attend live at NextGen. So if you attend all sessions throughout today, you could earn up to 5 CPE credits. Here's how you're going to get that credit. First things first, you're going to stick around for the entire session. Where would you want to go anyways? Step two, you're going to take all of the live polling questions. Now, if something crazy happens, a technical glitch, just send us a message in that chat and we'll get it sorted on the back end. I don't want you all to be stressed about that, but take all the poll questions if you can. And then 3, fill out that post CPE evaluation, and we will be sending your CPE certificate over to you in the next couple of weeks once we're able to confirm that you kind of hit all 3 of those things. Again, if you have any questions on CPEs, how to earn that credit, anything like that, by all means, please throw a message into that Q&A tab. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I do want to take a moment to thank our NextGen Alliance sponsors and our partners for helping us put on the summit today. So, without further ado, our wonderful partners are WAPA, Code for America, Young Government Leaders, Cisco, ServiceNow, Laserfish, Pluralsight, Carasoft, Atlassian, and Granicus. We couldn't do the summit without them. And like I said, if you have a chance, check them out in that exhibit hall. There's lots of great learning information over there. And then finally, before we jump into the content, and I promise we are all almost there, I want to take a brief moment here to talk about our Next Gen Public Service Awards. And I think it would be totally remiss and out of touch to not acknowledge that this year has been one of tremendous change for government agencies at all levels. And with those changes, a lot of folks have changed jobs, they've taken on more responsibility, they've gone above and beyond to fill in, and we want to acknowledge that effort. And if you or one of your colleagues should be honored, feel free to nominate them. Nominations are open and run through August 1st, and you can find a link to nominate someone in the resource section right now. All right. Let's get to our first poll question. And for this one, we want to know, have you been here before? Or is this your first Next Gen? Go ahead and fill out that poll. And like I said, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, just send us a message to that Q&A box and we will get your questions answered. And while you're taking that first poll, I want to get us excited because it's now time for our first keynote. And for this one, we want to know, how do you make yourself indispensable to the mission? And joining us to talk about this is Javier Inclán, who is the Assistant Inspector General for Management at the National Science Foundation's Office of Inspector General. Javier, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Emily. It's great to be here today.
All right. So the theme of this session is making yourself indispensable to the mission. What does that mean? What does that look like in practice? And can you share some of the attributes that go into that?
Absolutely. So, these are changing times across government at all levels. And I think the first thing folks have to do is make sure that they make themselves available and potentially indispensable to the mission of the organization. There are times where we are able to do things within our positions that aren't necessarily things that would be considered part of our job. But I think in this day and age, we need to raise our hand. We need to raise our hand and say, hey, what could I do in light of potentially, human capital resource reductions or increased mission or change of priorities? I usually say that sometimes, folks forget that just because I'm in this position today doesn't mean that I don't have a skill set from a different time or a different job. So raise your hand, talk to your supervisor, talk to your colleagues. We are, literally one organization, regardless of the size. And we need to make sure that we're doing a lot of that cross pollination so that we could ensure that we get the mission executed. The American public, whether they're at the federal level, state level, local level, et cetera, they're not attuned to human resource elimination or any type of reduction in workforce or any type of change in mission. They just want to get, the job done that they expect from the government. And as public servants, I think it's our responsibility to raise our hand and make sure that regardless of the challenges, number one, we focus on the mission. What is the actual mission of the organization? And then second is, how can I contribute to that mission, make myself indispensable to that mission by raising my hand and trying to help out as much as I can while still ensuring that my work gets completed.
Yeah. It's so interesting though, because I think sometimes it's sometimes hard to take yourself out of that mindset, right? And look at that bigger picture. So what are some attributes, Javier, that you see for a team player that's essential to mission success. As you're looking from that aperture of the big picture, what are some things or some attributes that you think our attendees here today could use or harness to really make themselves as indispensable as possible?
Yeah, so you used the word aperture, and I think that's the key, right? Sometimes we are so focused on what we're doing, right? Whether it's making widgets or writing things or doing things or producing things, that we forget that we have, other things across the board, and we need to put our big organization hat, not just our little team hat, especially during some changing times with shifting priorities. And we need to make sure that we don't say, well, it's not really part of my job, or it's not in my position description, or I've never really done that before, I'm not comfortable. You could say that, but then the next sentence would be, but I'll try. If you're going to give me the opportunity, to help the mission in a different way, I think that's the key to this. I normally talk about something that happened to me that was really my the best federal experience I've had was in 2018, when I was at the National Science Foundation, and the two executives in the HR division left. One left to an affirmative agency, and a month later, the deputy left to retire. And the chief operating officer asked me to fill in. And I told him, I said, look, sir, I don't know HR, right? I've been a facilities, logistics, administrative services type of person my entire career. And I may have written a position description or two as a supervisor, but I barely know how to spell HR. And he actually turned around and told me, he said, well, as an executive, isn't your job to lead more than it is being a technical expert? And he was saying that because I had thrown that to him several times over the previous year or so. So I clicked my heels and moved forward. And it was the best 8 months of my life, in my career. I learned so much, and not only about human resources, but I learned about the people business, right? Some organizations, especially in the private sector, they have things called chief people officer, right? So they're maybe moving away from chief human resource officer or chief human capital officer and calling themselves chief people officer. And I think that's the one thing that I could highlight to say that's what I learned. I would have never had the opportunity to learn about all those things if I didn't, well, not in this case, not raise my hand, but raise my hand after I was voluntold basically to do something. Although he said he wasn't going to force me to do it, I read the tea leaves, and I'm so happy that I did. If my aperture was smaller, I would have declined that opportunity, and I probably wouldn't be in the position I am today. So I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we may be called upon to do things. And if they see a gap, or people see that there's an opportunity, use it as a stretch goal, right? Stretch outside your comfort zone and say, hey, I'm willing to learn this, or I did it previously, maybe it was a few years ago, but let me go back and help the organization with their actual mission.
Yeah. All right. So I think you've led into my next question quite a bit already, but I want to really drill down on this idea because I think there is this notion, and I've been guilty of it myself, of I'm doing my job. I'm doing the most that could possibly be thinking about. And I get stuck on my job, kind of doing the things that I am quote unquote tasked to do. So what separates someone who is just doing the job from someone who is uh, aligning for that mission success and kind of thinking about that bigger picture?
Yeah. Doing the job is fine.
Yeah.
It really is. It's fine.
Yeah.
And you could equate it, at least in the federal government, a lot of our performance appraisals or rankings, if you get to the successful piece, it's fully successful, very good, outstanding. Doing your job is fine. And if you do it well, fully successful, right? If you did something a little above and beyond, you're at a very good. And if you did something that was really eye-opening, transformational, some type of significant change, it's outstanding. If you do your job and you do it well, and then you work your 8 hours and you go home, whatever the case may be, that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to be okay.
Mm.
I at least not yet. Maybe at some point when I get a little grayer, a little older. But at this point, I want to be more than that. And I think the key is to keep that in mind and not focus on the four corners of your position description, not focus on the four corners of what's in your, performance plan necessarily. Yes, do that and do it at an outstanding level, but also reach across, the teams. And this isn't about pushing people out of the way. A lot of times I've heard, hey, that person is trying to learn my job and they want to push me out. I'll
Mhm.
give you an example. Early on in my career, I was managing condominiums. That's one of my first full-time jobs.
Okay.
And my boss at the time, who was the owner of the company, took me out to lunch and he wanted to talk to me about some things. It was about budget and insurance and things like that, things that were not my responsibility. I was the on-site, property manager. And he said, Javier, just because you do one slice of toast doesn't prevent you from learning the entire loaf. And I have taken that for the last literally 30 years of my career. I thought, and I thank him every day because, that really at 24, 25, 26, whatever I was at the time, that's something that really intrigued me. And I've used it, right? And not in a way that sounds like I'm trying to push somebody out of the way or take somebody's job. I could do my job better if I understand what other people are doing better. That's number one. Number two is if there is an opportunity for a promotion or a lateral detail or a professional development opportunity, and I could say that, hey, I have a little experience. Remember when I did this for 4 months? I think I could do that now, right? And be able to equip yourself, with those skill sets. I had a boss who said, my job, meaning his job, is to put more arrows in your quiver, right? Sometimes your supervisor, if they're good, will do that. Sometimes you have to do it on your own. Sometimes you have to do it on your own time. And that's when there's an investment, right? If you're going to go in, work 8 hours, go home, and a lot of people have very busy lives, right? And I understand that. I had to do some things on my own time because I wanted to progress. I wanted to learn the Army regulations when I worked as a civilian with the Army and facilities, right? Because they have a whole, section of Army regs on facilities and construction. I wanted to, learn about contracts. So I asked my boss, hey, can I be a COR and do this contract? Things like that, right? So it really is up to the individual. And at the end of the day, the supervision, the supervisors, the executive leadership are going to see that. They're going to appreciate it. And they're not going to see it as someone who just wants to catch their next grade or chasing their next grade. It really is going to give them the unique view that somebody really wants to do their job, do it well, but continue to progress so that they have the skill sets they need to progress. And again, help the mission going forward.
All right. I know, Javier, that you and I prepared a whole bunch of questions, but here's the truth. I'm going to throw them out because our audience is asking some great questions and we're going to lean into them. So the first question says, and this is a little bit about balance. It says, at what point does going above and beyond not do it just excuse me, at what point does going above and beyond not doing your job, if you're constantly taking on more, how can you actually accomplish what you need to? So at some point, you can't do everything. We're not boiling the ocean here. How do you be strategic and thoughtful about where you're taking on growth points and where you're saying, I can't do that because X, Y, and Z needs to get accomplished?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. You're absolutely right. So, and thank you for that. People have to be self-reflective of what their abilities are and what their bandwidth is. Different people work in different ways, right? Some people have very good time management skills. Other people do not. Some people set boundaries. Other people do not, right? I'm talking specifically in the federal government now, where we are, most of us are full-time back in the office, in the physical federal building, right? That creates what we used to have for many years is that opportunity for people to say, hey, do you have a minute? Hey, can I walk in? Or the water cooler chat, or let's go to lunch, right? Things like that. And that's great. That is absolutely important. There's a need to have that socialization from a work perspective, as well as to get that mental break. But that has to be balanced with, I actually have to do my job. Unfortunately, I've come across some employees who said that they're real busy, and I saw them be real busy at everything but their job, right? And I had to call them in and say, okay, I understand, your workload, but I do believe that you can accomplish your workload very well in 6 or 7 hours a day, whatever the case may be. And then say, because I did, see that you raised your hand for this and you volunteered for that. And, you took an hour lunch or whatever. And, things like that, that we just need to be cognizant of our own bandwidth, and really just take that under consideration. And yes, if you have to do some time, of self-reflection to really balance, well, I really can't do this stretch goal during this period because I have to do this, then you need to tell your supervisor that, and you need to, make sure that you understand that. A lot of our jobs are also peaks and valleys, right? They ebb and flow, right? There's certain times of the year, if you're in budget or procurement, probably August, September is real busy. Financial management, and then maybe October, November, not as much. It depends on the agency, but that's usually the way it goes. So maybe it's like, hey, not right now, but in 2 or 3 months, I think I'll be able to do that, right? And I think we have to make sure that we set those expectations for ourselves before somebody pushes something too much on us. It is true that a boss, if they see that Emily does great work and takes on stuff, the boss is going to give Emily more, right? And that's just a way to, and at some point there has to be that honest conversation. That's where relationship with your supervisor comes in, and say, hey boss, I really appreciate that, but can I punt on this one because I really have to get this and this done, and be specific about that with time frames, so that your boss doesn't say, oh, Emily just doesn't want to do it. No, Emily's real busy right now. Maybe if there's an opportunity next November, I'll ask you to do whatever's next.
Yeah. Sally kind of added on to what we're talking about here in the chat. She said, if one steps in to plug holes in an organization, how can you assure that these responsibilities don't morph into a permanent or unofficial duty on your plate, or that you're compensated appropriately? Because at some point, if you're taking on all these new responsibilities, right, and an organization, many organizations right now are shifting, priorities are changing, people's responsibilities are all over the place in a lot of different cases. How do you have that conversation with your manager in a way that is strategic and says, I want to do some stuff, but there are this many hours in the day? What does that look like in a productive?
Yeah. I appreciate when an employee comes to me and says, hey, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. I'm at this bandwidth point, and I'm really full. Is there anything you don't want me to do or don't need me to do right now, so that I could focus on these new priorities or these new, functions that you've given me, right? And again, be specific, right? Be able to prove your point to a certain extent, so it's just not, well, I don't know what you mean. Like, I see you walking around.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's about, hey, I have to get my job done. So is there anything that you want me to shift, either not do at all, or do I not do because the mission doesn't require it, or what can I delay in order to focus on these three things first? We're all going to have to multitask. We all do that on a regular basis, right? But then, yes, it absolutely gets to a point where there's only so many hours in a day that you get compensated for. And that has to be a realization from the supervisor as well. If that supervisor continues to pile on, even after you have that conversation, I would say, not a great supervisor. And then you need to, make decisions based on that.
Yeah. If only we all had terrific supervisors. I have a good one, just to be clear. He's
So do
listening
I.
right now. But I think sometimes it is hard when you're in that situation where you're maybe doing all the steps that you and I are talking about here, but you're hit with a brick wall of some kind. And then that really does kind of need to be a different conversation, because you can't have one about priorities if there isn't that kind of ebb and flow back and forth. All right. A couple more questions for you. So let me see, which one should we go? Okay, here's one. Have you been in a situation where you've held yourself back in your career because either you didn't want to outshine others, or you didn't trust that you could accomplish or take on a task or a project? And how do you deal with those experiences? I think a lot of us deal with imposter syndrome in some way, shape, or form. You mentioned your experience earlier in the world of HR. I'm curious what advice you give to your folks as you're asking them to explore different things. How do you raise your hand if maybe you're not 100% confident that you've got all of the skills already in place?
Yeah, I think it's to be honest with yourself and with your supervisor, right? To be able to say, hey, I have no problem stretching this one may be a little too much, right? This rubber band may not go all the way to where you want me to get. However, I'm interested. I'm interested in learning. I know that takes some time, but if you want me to do it well, I think I'm going to need to have X, Y, and Z, right? And X, Y, and Z could be on the job training. It doesn't have to be like go to this class and now you're an expert, right? It could be shadowing somebody. It could be doing a temporary detail as a trial period, so to speak. But there was one time where it was actually in the private sector where I was thrown into something, and then there was a bait and switch, and I got thrown into something else. And I mean, I'll be very honest. There was one time where I actually started crying in the office because I was in my late 20s. And I thought I was doing a good job. And then they gave me something else because I was doing such a good job at the first thing. But the second thing was so different. I couldn't even begin to understand. So I went home and calmed myself down. It was a Friday, so I took the weekend, and then Monday morning I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, look, I had a tough time understanding what your expectation of me is. Is there anything I could do to make sure that I'm better prepared to take this on?" And he apologized and he said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." He sent me to a conference. He sent me to some classes. The individual that I was going to be reporting to dotted line gave me some OJT and allowed me to sit in on some meetings, and then I felt more comfortable. I said, okay, now I feel like I'm 30% there and I could do the other 70%, right? But I was really feeling as if I was almost set up to fail, right? That's how really I was feeling, because I was newer to the organization. I was only there 2 months, and I didn't know anybody. And I was like, man, am I getting thrown to the wolves? Is somebody setting me up? New guy, what's he doing here? It wasn't any of that. It was just like, oh, I didn't realize. And I'm going to make adjustments. So being honest and having that communication up front and not waiting, right? I know a lot of folks are like, well, I'm just going to eat it because my boss doesn't want to hear it. Maybe they do want to hear it, right? Maybe they want to, have that feedback, because if you're quiet, sometimes silence is concurrence. Right. And I think it has to be, that upfront. And again, you have to have that upfront communication, but also you have to have established a good relationship with your supervisor.
Yeah. I think that's so critically important, and it sounds easy to do when you say it, right? Like, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to have a conversation and kind of express myself. But that's a lot of bravery that you need to kind of muster, and also a lot of maturity in the situation to be like, this is what I'm seeing. Can you help me better understand that? And I think for a lot of folks, myself included, sometimes that ability to kind of be vulnerable in that moment is really scary. So hearing other people's stories is so beneficial in that. All right, Javier, we are almost out of time for our keynote, which I absolutely cannot believe. But I have two more kind of quick questions for you. And the first is, we've been talking about kind of stretch goals and taking on things that maybe are outside of your purview. And this question said, if you're interested in stretching and you think you could be flexible as a leader rather than, let's say, a tech expert or a subject matter in your own kind of silo here, but others within the organization might not see that in you quite yet, right? Like, they know Emily leads sessions. They don't know that Emily also dabbles in creative writing. I don't, but I could. How do you make yourself more viewable in those cases? How do you kind of get other people to see that this is something that you could do?
Yeah, one of the things that I found helpful, at least in my career, was to volunteer on cross-agency committees, things where you may be representing your organization, but you're providing input on the entire loaf, as one of my first bosses said. The other thing is to talk to your boss and say, and this is something, there's a beauty in this, right? There's this really kind and genuine way to say, hey, boss, what can I take off your plate?
Mhm.
Right? And say, I'm interested in doing this. I have this skill set. I think I could help you out. And then I think the third thing is, even in just a networking or social aspect of the job, talking to your colleagues, right? I don't think people are that shy of asking for help, right? Especially if they're at that point. And if Emily says, "Hey, Javier, I know you're doing that, that strategic plan. I dabble in creative writing. Maybe, we could make, we could, hook up on that project and, merge, the two things, right? The technical aspect that you're bringing, but, I'm bringing part of that writing piece, right? And absolutely, I just saw something pop up that say lead up. Absolutely. There's a difference between sucking up and being genuine. And I think a good supervisor will be able to flesh out, which one is the first one and which one's the second one. Because just because you're offering doesn't mean you're sucking up, right? No, it just means like, no, I'm being genuine. Like I know that we're in a tough time. And I just had that a couple of months ago where folks in my office were like, what else can I do? To make your life, less difficult. So I think those are, a few key points that people could take in mind.
All right. Final question for you, Javier. I'm curious, we've kind of skirted around this a little bit, but things are changing right now in government. It's been a couple months of tremendous transformation happening. Whether you agree with them or don't agree with the changes, a lot of change is happening. So with this in mind, what is your takeaway for our attendees today? What do you want them to walk away from this session thinking about, knowing as it pertains to aligning yourself to your mission?
Yeah. I'll say two things. Number one is stay focused on your job, right? While you're looking at other opportunities and growth and stretch goals and everything like that, don't worry about things that you have absolutely no control over, right? I'll paraphrase Will Rogers, who said, "Worrying is like paying on a debt that never comes due." Right? And if I'm worrying about something, about me making a decision, taking a job, not taking a job, doing this or doing that, that's within my control. So I should probably worry about that or at least be preoccupied with that. But if it's something that's out of my control, something that, the very big bosses or other folks, external factors, things like that are going to make decisions, if it doesn't impact me and my day-to-day job and I can't control it, try not to worry about it. I know it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. I'll say that 3 times. But, try not to worry about it. Focus on the job. Focus on, laying low, keeping your head down, doing the mission, learning as much as you can, help out, be indispensable to the mission. And then the second thing is be proud of public service, right? We may not be recognized by folks. We're not going to be the talk of the party or the dinner. Some people have some animosity towards public servants. Others understand, what we do and the need for them. Just know that we're in it for a reason. And that reason is internal, right? We have this, this passion, this flame inside of us that we want to give back and we want to be public servants. And I think we just have to keep that front and center within ourselves so that we understand what drives us going forward.
I think that is a beautiful sentiment to end us on, because what everyone who's on this session today really does matter. What the work that they do matters. The work that you, Javier, do matters a whole lot. And if we can tell that your stories, we're definitely going to do it. So join me in giving Javier a big round of applause today. We really appreciate you kicking us off today, Javier, with that inspiring message.
Thank you very much, Emily. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Definitely. All right. So, poll number two is coming your way right now. And for this poll, we're just really kind of curious. Has your role at all shifted in the last 6 months or so? And while you are taking that poll, I am going to introduce you to our next speaker. And joining us to talk about the power of the pivot. Maybe you are doing something a little bit different, and how to adapt in changing times is Jennifer Franks. She is the Director of Information Technology and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Emily, and all. I look forward to having this very critical conversation and, coming from the conversation that Javier just had and really living in the chat with the conversations and the questions people are asking and even some of the the statements that people are attesting to in the work environment, it is such a critical time to just understand, where we are, have that situational awareness and even that self-awareness to know what's for you, it's for you. And you may have to have some very crucial and courageous conversations about what is and how it's impacting you. So I really do look forward to having this few moments to talk to you about the power of the pivot and really looking at, where we are in the government world of showing up every single day and considering some of the major drivers of change being, new administrations, technological disruptions or advancements, global crises, economic and market shifts. We're seeing it all. We're seeing the demand for our services increase in some areas and even decrease in others. So it's really important to focus on that pivot and understanding change can be inevitable, right? And sometimes change is scary. It's reality. It's a need to feel that, where we were, you were comfortable. You were used to it. You were familiar with it. And then we need to sometimes make some adaptation and some incremental adjustments to just improve on some of the performance and the efficiencies of where we are. But in the core end of that, we have some change. So next slide, please. I want to start with looking at this quote. And the quote really focuses on you as an individual. It focuses on when obstacles arise, you change your direction to reach your goal and you do not change your decision to get there. So oftentimes, and even what Javier was saying, sometimes we have a lack of self-reflection and awareness of what it is we're doing and how it is we're contributing to an environment. And we never want to dim anyone's light, right? But sometimes we have to take different paths to get to the goals that we strive for. The objective doesn't have to change, but we need to refocus our energies on refining the path to get us to that overall objective. We want to be efficient and make some necessary adjustments and improvements to perhaps make a smoother path and create and maintain that goal for obtaining that vision. Next slide. So why does the pivot matter, right? So a pivot is a strategic shift and it's not, something that you need to focus on the abandonment of your issue areas. You really want to think about where we are culturally to better align with reality, opportunities, and even our personal evolving goals. So you want to think about technology first. I'm a cybersecurity specialist, so I'm always going to have technology in my mindset. But I know all of us here represent many different fields. But when you think about successes, pre-COVID, a lot of us were not using communication technologies such as this as frequently as we are now, right? But then we saw the rapid scale of virtual technologies accelerating in this pace, and they constantly have to adapt and evolve because of the changing current of the times and the market demand. For example, if you think about some things that might have failed along the way, I'm going to tell you my age here without telling you, but back when I was a child, I enjoyed trying to go to Blockbuster on Friday night with my family and pick out that VHS or even the DVD at times to watch for the weekend, and even maybe a video game for one of my consoles. But Blockbuster's no more. It is gone. It is part of our historical the time frames. And what happened to Blockbuster is they failed to adapt. And it was primarily focused on the digital age. And a combination of factors were presented there, overconfidence in their brick and mortar operational status. Whereas we were moving towards, streaming and really understanding the rise of that type of service for the demand of the culture. There was a lack of innovation and agility. So when you think about where you are now and where you're striving to go, you have to think about the what is and understand why you need to pivot, when you need to pivot. So when you're thinking about, some of your current approaches and perhaps being a little outdated, you never want to lose your passion and your goals, right? Javier even mentioned this morning, some of us, I believe in work-life balance and I'm big on self-care, yes. But sometimes with the work, there's ebbs and flows, highs and lows. So you may not be extremely busy 12 months out of the year. It's fine. But if your passion is still fueled and ignited with the what is, then you may have some clear answers. But what if it's not, right? Sometimes your desired outcomes can give you so many heartburn reactions that you have to sit and reflect, is this what I want? Is the time now to reconsider some things? Never looking at some of the efforts as a setback that is a failure, but a setback that presents an opportunity for a clearer vision, a clearer, less bumpy path. So we want to really focus on your art of progression, of yielding positive desired goals for yourself, your career, your family, your friends. But we want to reassess and align those goals with the here and the now. We want to focus on some of the desired outcomes in the changing circumstances. Yes, it's inevitable that team members come and go, new administrations come and go. But what does that mean for you in the emergence of the now? What are you going to need to continually drive and fuel your passion to create that motivation to keep it going? So by paying attention to these signs, you really can have some conversations with yourself to really assess the time that you need to understand where you are and to say, hey, I'm ready for a change. We need to pivot to make some necessary adjustments to perhaps stay on track. Next slide, please. Awesome. So I have this pivot framework here to kind of drive some of that conversation and your thoughts around what it looks like. And really, this framework essentially helps us to identify and pursue new opportunities. We're centering our mind around the self-reflection because oftentimes we don't sit in it and really reflect on the what is and the where we are and the where we should go. We often move so fast, we stop listening. And it's really critically important to understand, have those self-reflection moments to make the necessary improvements with your strengths and even your weaknesses to reduce your blind spots. Because we want to always evolve and be agile as we're taking on new opportunities and considering how we shift in the progression of where it is we need to go and the why. So the next slide talks through the benefits of pivoting, right? And with that, we want to consider increased flexibility. We got to be adaptable to the changing times. I'm a certified strengths coach from the Gallup program, and one of my 5 top strengths is being adaptable. So when you're thinking about pivoting and some of the benefits, having that increased flexibility to really assess, how you're going to navigate through some very uncertain times, it's so critically important so that you can then open those additional doors for you and yourself and maybe your colleagues to explore different things. It also helps you to strengthen your resiliency with where we are and where we're going. Sometimes, yeah, there's some uncertainties, but if you have your eye on being flexible and being adaptable, some of the long-term strategies that you put in place can really have some lasting impact for where it is you are to where it is you then need to go. So I don't have a poll here, but I'm sure some of you have heard the saying, what's for you will be for you. And I personally live by this statement because it applies that what is destined to happen in your life will eventually occur. Sometimes it's just not on our time. So regardless of your efforts or even the efforts of those I saw in the chat, sometimes we have colleagues or even bosses or mentors who are not championing for us. That's okay. They can do all they want to do to prevent it. But what's for you will be for you, because we want to encourage you to accept and trust in the process. Trust in the unfolding of events that is teaching you and showing you the what is and the where you need to go. And sometimes the negative things just need to ultimately help you to learn so that they can then ultimately pass you by and you can keep your eye on the prize for that objective of where you need to go. So the next slide, I actually have another quote that I inherently live by, and it's focused on that growth mindset, right? It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And there are psychological and emotional dimensions of pivoting. There are psychological and emotional dimensions of change. And to understand the change, you have to realize there could be some uncertainties of feelings where you're feeling uneasy. This isn't the place where you know or where you want to be or what you're used to rather. But it doesn't mean that it's purely a negative and a setback or even a failure. But it gives you some re-envision focus to be resilient and show that you can be adaptable, which helps you to thrive in very dynamic environments. And of course, as we know in our world, being dynamic in the ever-changing environment, rather, it's so critically important. Again, with me being in cyber and technology, we have advances in our industry almost every single day. We gotta be dynamic to adapt to our different environments, which means some of my team members look at the opportunity word as a negative, but I really want us to be encouraged to look at opportunities for growth and development as a path to what's next. Seek and embrace that feedback. Sometimes giving feedback or receiving it, it can be so cringy and so difficult. But when you are open to having those very courageous and constructive conversations, it can really help you to face those setbacks head on and realize the what is and the how it is you need to move forward. And with my last slide, before we open to some additional questions, I do want to focus our attention on understanding again, pivoting is not a failure. It is the strategic part of evolving as a person in this process of understanding your personal and even professional paths of where you should go. So I encourage you to ask those very critical questions to yourself to understand, do you need to adapt to the change or should you consider pivoting? And you don't have to pivot alone. Javier talked about the power of networking. I also firmly believe in having a board of directors for your career to help you to be coached and advised and mentored in a way that really will impact the where you want to go and perhaps how you get there. But you have to start by creating this idea to strengthen yourself, strengthen your weaknesses and your gaps, and really create this launch plan for where it is you want to take this objective while clearly identifying how you pivot and how you design the potentiality of this new path. So Emily, I'm happy to, take some new questions as we, um, open it up. I do see one of the last questions here, at 60, your days of pivoting is over. No, you can learn. Listen, my 74 and 5-year-old parents pivot with technology every single day. I literally just bought my mom a charging bank, and she was very confused with all the cables that came in the bank and didn't know which one was going to be used for which part of her technology or not. And we had a learning opportunity. I constantly have learning and cyber opportunities for learning and advancing within my family group chats or family dinners. They're always asking me, is this a phishing scam? So there's always ways to pivot and learn and do things differently. I'm not saying move your whole career all the time, but sometimes you just got to be nimble
Yeah.
and learn some new things.
Okay. I have a whole litany of questions for us. So we're gonna do
I love
these
it.
in rapid fire format. The first is, how often do I need to be pivoting? If I'm just hula hooping through life here, turning in corners, it's gonna get hectic. So how often are we addressing this?
That's a good question. Now, I'm not telling you to join the hula hoop competition and just hula hoop your way into oblivion. But, I believe in creating long-term goals and short-term sprints to get there, right? So, and from a religious aspect, it's just me.
Yep.
I always say God laughs at our plans and he has the final say. And sometimes you do need to throw on that hula hoop and try something different and go down a different path. But when you get a little exhausted with what this is doing and how it's facing for you, maybe try some double dutch. Got to change it up a little bit. I can't give you a timeline because the timeline is suited for you because you know what's for you and will be for you and what's best. But you just have to also give it some time. Sometimes it takes 1, 2, 3 chances
Mhm.
before you can throw your hat in the race and say, I'm done.
Yeah.
So for you, you have to evaluate that. There have been some opportunities in my career where I was one and done and I was mad and I said, oh, I never want to do this again.
Yeah.
Then I had to reflect and say, is that the best way? Am I
Yeah.
just being a negative Nancy of things? So you have to really evaluate what's working for you.
Okay. Next question. And people are loving your double dutch. Never was able to successfully double dutch. It's been a real disappointment of my elementary school career. But what if you are pivoted? And by that, I mean, what if something happens, whether it's a new role or you get new responsibilities, you're let go of a role. How do you pivot when the pivot wasn't your choice?
Oh my goodness. That goes to that opportunities I talked about. And I was saying, don't look at it as a negative. Listen, grow with it. And this is where you have that board of directors of your career that come in handy. Because sometimes you get some surprises and you're like, this is not what I signed up for. I enjoyed being over here. And that's great. But it's up to you to use your lens, and instead of reviewing things from that rose filtered glass, have a moment to reflect while you're not pivoting alone. You have that board of directors that champions for you. Understand what is they're asking you to do. Oftentimes I'm presented with new challenges. Yes. One of my colleagues left last year and I'm very gainfully employed leading what I'm leading for my agency. But when my colleague abruptly left the agency, they were like, oh, and you do this too.
Yeah.
That didn't come with more pay. It came with more responsibilities. And I wanted to run and never look back. But I had to take a look at why they were asking me and what my skill set, my lens, my experiences, and my strengths could offer to that environment. Do I choose to be in it? I did not choose it, nor do I wish to be in it for long. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to add it, one, to my resume, and two, to give it a shot so that I can even show myself that I can do this. And sometimes it just starts with that self pep talk.
Yeah. Okay. So we are rapidly running out of time for this session, but I have two more quick questions for you.
Okay.
And the first is, how do you give yourself a break? And here's where I'm going with this. Pivoting is hard. Going through this work is hard. It's exhausting. There have been days where a lot of folks here have been working really long hours, yourself included, Jennifer. I think you sent me this slide deck at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I had questions. But there's a lot happening and it's exhausting. So,
Okay.
how do you balance the need to pivot, the need to continue to be forward leaning and learning new skills? How do you balance all of this with the reality that it's difficult sometimes?
Difficult. It's difficult. It doesn't come easy. And I'm not going to say, I always have the answers. But I know for me, I'm a whole executive at this point, and I got to the end of the end of the calendar year last year, and I had over 30 days of use or lose that I had not taken. That's not a celebration.
No.
That's not good. I need time off.
Yeah.
I need to stop, break, reflect. And you do too. And I celebrate the wins. I have coffee chats with my staff and we have formal meetings as well. But in those opportunities, I'm like, what are y'all doing for self-care? What are you doing to break? For me, I promised myself at the beginning of this fiscal year, regardless of what's going on, cyber's always trending. There's always something. I have 70 staff members that have life happening. We have engagements happening, just a lot. Boundaries was my word of the year. I push back. I say no. If I feel like I can't give the best quality and yield the best result of Jennifer, I'm going to have to back out. And I'm going to have to back out in such a way that you're understanding it's not an inevitable no for good. But in this pivot, I have to care for myself. You got to give yourself grace and you have to perform in such a way that you're not pouring from an empty pot. And it took me a while to realize what that meant and how it really impacted my career. But even now, sometimes I have to take a step back and be like, one day is not going to be enough break for me. So last week I was talking to one of my operations managers and he said, I'm just going to take the week before Memorial Day and just breathe. So you know what? I'm going to take some time too. I had no plans, but I'm out now about to be off Thursday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday just to breathe, rest, reset, breathe in some new fresh air, to do some things that I can't necessarily do in the struggle of the change of adapting times. Because again, everybody who leans on you to perform the quality work that you are assigned, wherever you are, and I see the poll, we're talking about GS1s, through executives, through people who have been here 1 year, through 20 plus years of their career, you have to feed and protect your own energy before you can give that energy to someone else. And that's with your personal family or in your profession. So you got to learn when to give yourself that grace and take a step back.
Yeah. All right. Final question for you right now. I think of NextGen this year as a little bit like a hug to our federal and state and local government friends, right? There's not a whole lot we can do on a day-to-day basis necessarily to make things a little bit easier besides provide professional development content like this one. And so as we exit this opening keynote, what do you want government employees to know? What do you want their takeaway to be as they log out of this session and go back to their offices tomorrow?
First of all, I have given my entire career thus far, 19 years into federal service. There is not a day that I still do not enjoy what I do. I'm getting emotional now because that's one of the most sensitive topics, right? Like I love what I do. I love where I work, who I work with, and the mission that we serve for the American people. So hug yourselves, celebrate your wins, and rejoice in the fact that you are seen and you are definitely appreciated. I give you the advice to find your network, though. We cannot do this alone. We can't do this in silos. I know sometimes it's very difficult in geographically dispersed areas or hybrid communities, but when you organically find your people that you can connect with and just be able to just woosah with, it can help you so much more. And it actually keeps you better focused and energized about what's next. It is so important.
I love that. All right. We are just all the feels. If we get through today without crying, I'm gonna be thrilled.
I know, right? I love what I do. I love you.
All right. Everybody says in the chat here that you need a podcast, and I couldn't agree.
I thought about doing it. Emily, we should collaborate.
Oh, right. Well, next year, by this time next year, we got things going for us. But join me in giving Jennifer a round of applause because she really brought it for this presentation. So thank you so much for kicking us off, Jennifer.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right. So, for everyone who's going to be sticking around for the next sessions, I've got some reminders for you. First, don't forget to fill out your CPE evaluation in order to get your credit. And if you haven't already, we got a short little break here. Head over to the exhibit hall to check out the amazing booths. They're filled with a lot of additional information and resources. Up next is our first round of breakout sessions. They're going to start in 15 short minutes. You can access those sessions in the main environment through that sessions tab. So let us know if you're ever running into any issues there. You can also chat with us in the lobby chat. Let us know what you're doing, what you're up to, what you like, what you don't like. We wanna know it all. And lastly, I just want to thank our NextGen Alliance partners, because without them, NextGen wouldn't be possible. Thank you all so much for joining us for this first session, and we will see you in breakout session number 1 in 15 minutes. Thanks so much, everyone.